Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
He's in the building!
Drink the moment. Drink it.
I said empty your mind.
Coquettish and coy. Ow. Ow.
What?
There's people that are dying.
Wickedly talented.
More than great. It was historic.
Crack is
Oh, good for you.
I have to apologize.
One of the hottest.
Hey, hotties, and welcome back to The Reheat, a podcast that re-examines the hottest celebrity news and scandals of yesteryear and asks, how would we react to the same events if they transpired today? I hope you all have that memorized by now. I'm your co-host, Sarah Ferguson.
And I'm your other co-host, Sarah Ferguson. This week, we will be re-examining Sarah Ferguson, a.k.a. the Duchess of York, a.k.a. Fergie, and not the one from the Black Eyed Peas. She's
Maybe one day, though. One day.
She's the former member of the House of Windsor who married the now disgraced Prince Andrew in 1986, which is likely at least one of the reasons why the name Sarah was the most popular girl's name in North America in the year of my birth. Fergie was initially described as a breath of fresh air by the media, who saw her as a down-to-earth antidote to the impossibly glamorous Princess Diana. But Fergie's trajectory also shows us how unforgiving the media can be when women make mistakes. The very things that made her relatable to begin with, her curves, her lack of polish, her vulnerability, would eventually bring her down. Sadaf, what is your relationship to Fergie? Are you familiar with her story?
First, I have to ask, Sarah, does this mean that you were named after Fergie?
No. I was named after my great-great-aunt Sarah, but it didn't help that Fergie got married that year because there were, I think, 15 Sarahs in my graduating class.
Wow.
I don't even think I'm exaggerating.
Oh my God, I know so many Sarahs. I have a cousin Sarah, and I do use Sarah sometimes at Starbucks. So I support that. I love that. I love a Sarah. My relationship to Fergie is slim to none. I know of her. She was probably the first royal that I knew other than Princess Diana, really. And these days, I only think of her in relation to Prince Andrew. I am so sorry to say. I know we're going to get into why exactly. But I'm sorry, Fergie. I do know her as being quite chic. She has red hair, right? I think. Yeah, see, that's how much I know about Fergie. That's why I'm excited for today. I'm coming in empty-brained. This is great.
She is an iconic redhead.
Yes.
So, Sarah Ferguson was born in 1959 to a very British place on the class hierarchy. Her family was rich in connections, but not in cash. Her father, Ronald Ferguson, was a polo manager who first worked for the Duke of Edinburgh and later for King Charles when he was still the Prince of Wales. Sarah and her sister Jane were raised in a town called Dummer. She also grew up with ADHD, which was not diagnosed until her adulthood, and she had learning difficulties such as dyscalculia that she would not be aware of until her own daughter was diagnosed with dyslexia. Sarah was an enthusiastic equestrian and skier, but her parents bizarrely sent her to Hurst Lodge School, which was famous for its ballet program. And it did not make a ballerina out of Sarah. She has made it clear she did not excel at ballet, but she was still the head girl. That's probably because she was so bubbly. People always remarked when she was younger about her bubbly personality. That's just a really common way of describing her.
Can I also just say, it's so rich and so royal to be an equestrian and to be a skier. Like, there really are sports just for the wealthy, I feel.
Yeah, there definitely are. I mean, in terms of actually having cash in the bank, I don't think her family had a ton of it, but they did consort with rich people and knew about their hobbies and excelled at them. So that gives you a certain amount of cachet in British society. This is just such a British family.
Yes, yeah.
Sarah's childhood was marked in no small part by her parents' divorce in 1974. Her mother, Susan, left her 2 daughters to marry an Argentine polo player. The woman had a type because polo
Wow.
features prominently in her love life, and she lived out her days in rural Argentina.
Wow.
This is likely where Sarah's self-described people-pleasing began. When her mother left, Sarah describes only expressing happiness for her mom, even though it was ripping her family apart. So she basically just told her mom she wanted her to be happy, which feeling
Wow.
like you need to say that when your mom is abandoning you to move to a different continent, oof.
Yeah, wow.
Women with unhappy childhoods who are underserved by their loved ones often grow up into people pleasers. That's something that many people have observed. Sadaf, why do you think this is such a common narrative? Also, on a scale of 1 to 10, how relatable is Fergie's early life for someone who grew up to be a princess?
0. I feel like just as I just said, even though her family was not, loaded in cash, it was the life of a certain creed, right? Certain class and creed. I am not a horse girl, never had the privilege of being a horse girl, but I love that for Fergie. Why do I think this is such a common narrative? I think a lot of women are taught to grow up and be people pleasers, of course, and she definitely came from a specific generation where I'm sure that was in their blood. But I have to say, and by the way, I say that as a personal, I'm also a people pleaser, very much so. Maybe because I'm a middle child, I have no idea. But I think it's so fascinating. She was so happy for her mom leaving her. I am obsessed with this. And also, I would really like to know more about her mom's story and what the hell happened to her. Is she still with the Argentine polo player? I have questions.
She died in a car accident, but
Okay.
she did stay with him for the rest of their lives. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think their love story worked out for them. It wasn't great for the Ferguson family.
Well said.
Having said that, her mom did die quite tragically.
Oh, okay then. What about her dad though? Like, what was the story around him?
He remarried, and
Okay.
he had more children.
All right.
He also wasn't a particularly good dad. He sold Sarah out to the media and things like that. Yeah, I mean, her family wasn't great.
Yeah. Actually, you know what though? That all adds up even more so to me just questioning how she became such a not just a people pleaser, but seemingly like a nice person is what I've always gathered about her. But anyway, you're going to tell us more, I'm sure.
Yeah. After school, Sarah attended the Queen's Secretarial College and later worked in public relations firms and at a publishing company. But her life went from fairly regular to fairy tale when her old friend Diana Spencer called. By
Ooh.
this time, Diana was already the Princess of Wales and pretty lonely in her marriage. And what's a lonely girl to do? Matchmake for her brother-in-law. Fergie had crossed paths a few times with Andrew since her childhood, but it was Diana who invited Sarah Ferguson to a lunch at Windsor Castle. So
Oh my God.
this all went down really quickly. She goes to this lunch at Windsor in June of 1985. There, Andrew and Sarah started talking. They got on famously. According to Kitty Kelly's The Royals, one of Andrew's moves was to stuff profiteroles into Sarah's mouth, which she pretended to be offended by because they're fattening.
Oh God.
Sarah was known as a goofy girl who liked to make jokes, and she was also known for her signature fiery red hair and her freckles. Unlike previous women Andrew had dated, Sarah was beautiful, but she also looked and dressed like a normal, relatable person. Anyway, not even a year later, the pair of 20-somethings announced their engagement to the world. The press dubbed Sarah Ferguson Fergie, the nickname many still know her by today. The engagement was a big deal. Andrew was something of a heartthrob at the time. He was known as a war hero after serving in the Royal Navy. He also had been linked to plenty of ladies. His name in the press was Randy Andy. That was his nickname.
Ooh. Okay.
Uh-huh. And he had once dated softcore porn actress Koo Stark.
Oh, okay. Well, all right.
When the Queen's Playboy son settled down with a nice secretary in his mid-20s, it felt like a fantasy from a romance novel.
Yeah, this is so fascinating.
Sadaf, are you surprised Andrew fell so hard, so fast, and made a princess out of Sarah after only a matter of months? From Hallmark movie to Dido and Aeneas, where does this rank on the romance scale?
Okay, well, first I have to say, while you were talking, I quickly Googled young Prince Andrew because I know what he looks like now, which is not the most appealing. But
Yeah.
okay, this guy was handsome. Like
He
I
he
mean,
was.
Yeah, like he definitely, you can see the resemblance with Charles, sorry to say, but he was not a bad looking guy, definitely. But it just adds up a little bit more for me because otherwise I'm like, "Oh, Fergie, why?" But it sounds like they had good chemistry, and in any good romance story, good chemistry will take you everywhere. I think with Randy Andy, listen, I think he liked thrills, and I think he liked doing maybe what his brother couldn't do, which
Mhm.
we kind of saw for a while was the Harry versus William dynamic. There all seems to always be a royal sibling who gets to get away with more, and I feel like maybe Andy was one of those. I don't know, I kind of like thinking about it that way, but obviously it wasn't as perfect as it seemed in the beginning, right?
No, I mean, they were really young. They fell in love quickly. They got married quickly. And as we will learn later, Sarah didn't really understand what this royal marriage would
Mm,
entail. She had always grown up kind of royal adjacent, right? Her
right,
dad worked for the royal family. So she
right.
can't say that she was completely ignorant of what the royal family was like. But I do think that when you're immersed in it and you have to live with them, it hits a little differently.
Oh yeah, and I mean for her it must have also been appealing to marry a prince. I mean, I'm not saying that she did it just for that, but I think for any of us, marrying into the royal family is pretty exciting if it's a prospect. By the way, Sarah, how old were they at the time when they got married? Do we know?
They were in their mid-20s. I believe they were
Okay.
26. So
So
they
they
were
were
they were 25 when they met. They were young. These were people who were they were young and in love. By contrast, Charles had waited until his 30s to get married, right?
right, right.
So when you have Andy getting married a few years later and he's getting married young and he's getting married very fast, it just looks like it's a little bit more genuine to the public, I think.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so there was real Fergie fever, right? The
Yeah.
couple wed on July 23rd, 1986, and an estimated 100,000 people gathered to watch
Oh
the
my
wedding in
god.
person. And a further 500 million people around the world watched it on TV.
Oh my god, times were so different, huh? Wow.
Yeah. And everyone loved Fergie,
Mm.
including the House of Windsor, who gifted Andrew with a title that would make the newlyweds the Duke and Duchess of York.
So hold on.
A-
So this means the family was very accepting of Fergie as
oh,
opposed to
yeah,
her
they
friend
liked her.
Diana.
Well,
Yeah.
it didn't really matter who he married to the same degree. And also, I think in some ways he'd been strategic by dating women whom they really considered inappropriate. Like poor Koo
Right.
Stark, who was so slut shamed by the media because she was a softcore porn
So
actress. I
shitty and
yeah,
predictable
it
too, I gotta say.
yeah, what happened to her was awful. But I think because he'd started out dating women like that, when he brought home Fergie, they knew her dad.
Right, right.
She liked to ride horseback. She was a skier. She was kind of adjacent to the royals. I think they thought, okay, thank goodness. Yes, go marry her. We
Yeah,
completely support it.
true. It was kind of like he wore them down a little bit.
Yeah, he was a little bit more challenging. And also, it just didn't matter as much who he married, right?
Right,
He was
right.
never going to be king. By this point, Diana had children, and he was only ever second in line to Charles anyway before that. So it didn't matter. It just didn't matter,
I
right?
love that. I love that.
So I think everyone was jubilant. They were just happy he was happy. So a Daily Express headline referred to Sarah Ferguson as Fabulous Fergie, and the New York Times referred to the public and press love for the couple during their wedding as Fergie Frenzy. Sarah and Andrew's famous post-wedding kiss on the balcony of Buckingham Palace was broadcast around the world. And it really does seem genuine and romantic. When you see it, you think, okay, these two young people are in love. For her part, Fergie's reaction to her fairy tale was how most of us would probably feel if thrust into the spotlight. It was a mixture of extreme confusion and delight. She was said she has said that when she and her father were heading to the ceremony at Westminster Abbey, her dad asked, "Okay, like what do we do now?" after they got into the glass carriage, right? Like she was literally like Cinderella
God.
here. And she just told him, "I don't know, I've never done this before."
That's so cute. That's like right out of Netflix. Royalist movie. I love that.
I mean, it is. It's
Yeah.
adorable. It's a fairy tale, and it shows you no one is ever really prepared for the fairy tale.
Yeah.
So, Sadaf, do we think it was Fergie's relatability that made the world love her so much? After the almost impossibly beautiful and glamorous Diana, were people relieved to see a princess who was a bit goofier and a bit more normal looking, just like them? Is this a stars, they're just like us moment for the Windsors?
I mean, I'm wondering as you're talking, I have to assume that was it, right? Because I did not know that it was such a big thing for everybody. So many people showed out to just see it. I love that a lot. I feel like even today, in all this time, Fergie's appeal has been how relatable she is. She looks like a regular woman. She
Mhm.
always has. And I love that about her. I love the idea that, you could be sitting next to a royal at dinner or on a flight and you wouldn't even know it. She kind of has that appeal. Certainly that would be it for me. I think also, he wasn't a bad looking guy at the time. They probably made a beautiful couple. And it sounds like it was probably a stunning wedding. I'm actually going to look at photos right now as you talk.
It was a beautiful wedding. I mean, he was dashing for a member of the royal family. I mean, obviously he's incredibly creepy and not
Yeah.
nearly as conventionally handsome now, but he was dashing and she was super cute. She was adorable. She wasn't as conventionally beautiful as the women he'd previously dated, and that I think enhanced her appeal, right? It kind of made the average person feel like maybe I could marry a prince, right? When you look at Diana, you don't sort of relate to Diana. You don't think like, ah, yes, I could be like her one
You're
day.
so right. That's such a good point. I also have to say, because I'm looking at photos now of their wedding. Oh my God, it was so 80s.
Yeah, it is really 80s.
Yeah, if you're listening right now and you haven't seen the photos before, please go Google them. She had quite a dress. He definitely, wow. Andrew has got a lot of teeth, man. That's what I will say. But she looks so happy. She looks so happy. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, it was a genuine love match at the time. These two crazy kids were going to try to make it work. Everyone was rooting for them. Everyone was cheering for them. Charles and Diana at their wedding, it looks creepy, right? And I understand like Charles didn't necessarily want to marry a teenager.
Right.
There were a lot of forces that conspired to make that marriage happen, and kind of no one was super happy at that wedding. Diana was miserable. He was miserable. No one was super ecstatic.
Yes.
And they just look like such an inappropriate pair. Whereas it just oozes romance when you look at the photos
totally.
of Andrew and Sarah. And now we know that Andrew is a creep, but before we knew that, those photos are incredibly romantic.
Yeah, and I have to say he looks really happy too. I'm also just seeing that. Okay, so she had a 17-foot train, and there's this really lovely photo where they're coming off the balcony and he's carrying her train and she's waving to everybody. They look so cute. And apparently, a young Prince William stole the show because he was, I guess, making a lot of faces. They also had a really nice kiss on the balcony. Like, that looks like a quality kiss. Okay. Okay.
No, it's real. Like, it looks like they're actually attracted to
Yes!
each other.
Maybe that's what it is that I'm so struck by, because by a lot of royal weddings, especially this particular royal family, it doesn't quite often feel that way. And this is really, yeah, it's really sweet. And now bittersweet knowing where things go. But again, carry on, Sarah, you'll get us there.
I do think that this is probably my favorite royal wedding of all time.
Really?
I mean, it doesn't end well.
Yeah.
But it's cute and they're so happy, and it's not as self-important as when the heir gets married.
No, I get it now. I get it. Yeah. There's, oh gosh, there's so many stunning photos. Oh, I love it.
I know. It was a very beautiful, quintessentially 80s wedding.
Yeah.
Okay, I think the time has come for a short break. When we return, we will discuss the more salacious details of the Duchess's life. Unfortunately for Fergie, the fairy tale faded. The House of Windsor wouldn't allow her to live on Andrew's naval base with him, so they spent just 40 days a year together for the first 5 years of their marriage.
Oh my God.
I know, it's awful.
Oh my God.
I know.
Wow, I didn't know that. Oh my God. Huh.
I know. Fergie had lost more than 20 pounds in preparation for her wedding, but after the Windsors ordered her to stay in London for security reasons instead of accompanying her new husband, Fergie says she was lonely and had a bit of a breakdown. In 2001, she told Rosie O'Donnell this time was really hard for her, and she said, "I ate, and that was my friend." The late 20th century was a notoriously fat-shaming time, and the press was not kind, dubbing her the Duchess of Pork.
Oh my God. Ugh.
The Duchess recalled in a magazine interview with People, in the 1980s, it was Diana looking beautiful, and there was fat frumpy Fergie.
Oh my god, I'm so mad. I was gonna say I hate the media, but I guess we are the media. Oh my god. We're the good media, okay?
The press coverage put a strain on Diana and Fergie's longtime friendship, and so the embattled sisters-in-law didn't even have each other for support, which is a real tragedy.
That's awful. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's a really sad story. This becomes pretty tragic pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Why does the press coverage kind of feel like it's falling into this trap of dividing women? Why does this trend never die? Why do we love to pit women against each other? Even women who started as friends. I mean,
Yeah.
Diana match made for Fergie. She wanted her as a sister-in-law. Why do we have this age-old trope of wanting women to be rivals like they're on a Ryan Murphy show? And do you think the press coverage of Fergie today would have been just as fat-shaming?
Oh, that's a great question. I think, listen, the need to put women against each other, I think it's never going to die, quite honestly. I think
Mhm.
people like to imagine that all women really do is sit around and compete with other women, and all we want to do is best even our friends, which is so not true. I love women so much more than men. I'd rather compete with a man any day. But it's just this really archaic and honestly, I think patriarchal idea of what a woman is
Mhm.
like and what she does and what's important to her. And I think with the royals, it was probably so easy. Like it was like a layup, you know, right there. We have these two women who are best friends, but they're also sitting on other sides of the aisle, so to speak. As you said, Diana's is more on more of a platform, her relationship, whereas Fergie's is a different thing. And then when you look at Diana, she looks different in comparison to Fergie when it just comes to what's conventionally attractive, which I despise because I think Fergie is a perfectly beautiful woman as well.
Mhm.
But in terms of her weight, I don't think at all people like the Duchess of Pork. If someone said that now on a headline, I think you would be skewered. I don't think that you would ever come back from that. That would be calls for cancellation, but it's tough to say because right now we're also in a weird time where I think thin is back in a way it hasn't been since maybe the 80s and the 90s. So maybe we're seeing a little
Mhm.
bit of a return. I don't think it'll ever be at that level. What do you think, Sarah? I don't know for sure. We also don't have tabloids like we did then, at least not in North America.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be quite as overtly fat shaming, but I don't think people would be kind to her. I think they'd
No.
find other ways to say it, right? Like there are microaggressions you can make. They might talk about her binge eating, things like that, right? I think they would still get at it in a different way, but Duchess of
Mhm.
Pork is an incredibly cruel nickname. Like
Oh my
that's
god, it's
next level.
awful. Yeah, it's so awful. I also don't think that she was a fat woman, by the way. Not that fat is a bad word, it's not. But again, the definition of what is considered fat is very different from what it was how it was defined in the 80s.
And she's also always being directly compared to Diana,
Yeah.
who was very tall and very slim and looked like a runway model, right? And that's
Yeah.
why I think people always thought of her as being so conventionally attractive because we often hold up runway models as the epitome of conventional attractiveness.
Exactly.
And Diana wore a lot of designer clothes. She was very confident in wearing daring outfits. Sarah wasn't as much of a fashionista. I mean, nor am I,
Right.
nor are most people. She just didn't look like a model and also I don't think wanted to, but she
Well,
was being judged for that.
yeah, and you know what it makes me think of because we're saying so much about how great it is that she was so relatable, but I think that was also that made her an easy target for the press because I think there were plenty of people who maybe felt a little resentful about that. Like if you're going to get to have the privilege, quote unquote, of being in the palace and being a part of the family, you should look and act a certain way. Which is bullshit, obviously. The most exciting thing is getting to see a real person in the palace and get to marry into I shouldn't say get to marry, but marry into the family. But I'm sure that also was in flux on the other side of things, right? When it comes to the media.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that it was a celebration that an average person, or I mean, not average person, but sort of a more average than normal person got to be part of the Windsors. But then, as soon as she was a Windsor, everyone turned on her for not suddenly becoming more like Diana.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the way it is for women in the media. You just
Yeah.
can't win.
Yeah.
Well, all that pressure was not great for the Duchess of York. To top it all off, she gave birth to 2 daughters, Beatrix and Eugenie. Sorry, I said my daughter's name. To top it all off, she gave birth to 2 daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, who were born in 1988 and 1990, respectively, while Andrew was barely around. She also allegedly had a fling with Texas millionaire John Wyatt, whom she was photographed with in Morocco in 1990.
Go Fergie. Good.
For her. And so the marriage floundered. In 1992, the couple separated, the same year as Charles and Diana called it quits. A full 5 months after announcing the separation, Sarah was on a vacation in Saint-Tropez with her kids and another rich Texan.
She loves
financial
herself a rich
advisor.
Texan.
Yes, a financial advisor named John Bryan.
Another John as well.
She likes those Texans.
We know her type. She's got a type.
The Paps got photos of Fergie and John in an intimate moment. She was not trying to get caught. She was in the privacy of her own home in the south of France. But, the paparazzi are relentless. And they got some photos of her sunbathing topless while John was sucking her toes. When
Good
the photos
for
came out,
her again.
Yeah. When the photos came out, Fergie was actually staying at Balmoral with the rest of the royals, and they were not happy.
Yikes.
For his part, John Bryan insists he was not sucking the Duchess's toes, but was just kissing them. I don't know why this is so important for him.
Yep.
However, the media went with the sucking narrative. The images originally appeared in the British tabloid The Daily Mirror. The Mirror referred to the images of a separated Fergie with her boyfriend as Fergie's stolen kisses on the front page, kind of ignoring the fact that they weren't stolen. She was separated.
Yeah, seriously. But obviously this makes a better headline, right?
Yeah. Royal biographers agree that Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip were livid with the toe-sucking scandal. Fergie left Balmoral early and just never returned.
Wow.
Soon, she and Andrew would officially divorce, and Fergie would lose her HRH title in the process. So that's Her Royal Highness title, similar to how Princess Diana lost her HRH upon the demise of her marriage.
Wow.
So, Sadaf, do you think this would have been as big a scandal if it occurred today? If Meghan Markle left Prince Harry and was seen with another man besides Prince Harry, would we be acting like she had committed an unforgivable act of infidelity when the Paps violated her privacy, spied on her, and basically just proved that a separated woman has a sex life?
Oh, yeah. I think actually it would be worse for Meghan, right? Because again, Meghan is a woman of color and she's a little bit more in the spotlight than Fergie would have been, right? If we're looking at the trajectory. So I think it would be heinous for Meghan. I mean, here's the one thing, and I was thinking about this as you were talking. The British press is a little bit different from the American press. We've talked about this when we've done previous royal episodes. The British press is so voracious and nasty, and they take things to a whole other level. And, as we've heard, there's been many rumors that there's someone in the palace, the administration, who will leak details to the press and all these sorts of things. So I think they've always had it out for these women. They would be so horrible to Meghan. But what I'm trying to think about is if it was a white woman, if it was somebody who was on the same level as Fergie, I do think it would still cause a stir. I really do. I think and the toe sucking thing, I mean, listen, get your toes sucked, lady. Good for you. Good for both of you. I'm fully in support of a foot fetish, but I think that's not something we talk about ever in the press. So I can fully see, even now, a tabloid picking that up and being like, whoa, sexual animals, even though this is very tame behavior, whether he was sucking or kissing them. What do you think, Sarah?
Yes, I absolutely think this would be just as big a deal today. I mean, Meghan Markle is racialized, so that would add another dimension. But I mean, even if it were a white woman, I do think the media loves to slut shame women to this day. So I think you would also get people calling her out as though she was being unfaithful when she was a separated woman. She wasn't cheating.
Well, I think the other thing too is that for some insane reason, the royals have to be viewed as sexless. And I think
Mhm.
even Prince Harry took that a little further with his previous dalliances. Like, just
Mhm.
getting to see a royal date someone in the era of social media, we were seeing that. And that was even strange and unique. But I mean, if we saw William and Kate have a heated makeout, that would be insane. Like, I would love to see that. And that's not particularly sexual. That's just sweet and romantic, and that's a couple in love. But I think it would be turned into something really heated because it's just not how we see the royals, right? And toe sucking just takes it to a whole other level. Again, Diana is a special story, but for her, the other quote unquote, the relationships that she had, they were also taken to this insane level of controversy. Like, it's bullshit.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, these controversies were, if anything, bigger than the controversy over Prince Andrew being an alleged rapist.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
I mean, we really do see the double standard for women. Like, a
Oh,
woman
yeah.
having consensual sex when she's separated from her husband is somehow as scandalous as a man potentially raping someone.
Oof. Well, then also, I mean, Charles and Camilla, was it the phone call where he says he wishes he was her tampon?
Yeah.
Yes. Like, I don't think that got, I mean, I don't know if I was around at the time, but I get the sense that didn't even get as much heat as when any of these women were caught up in something.
I mean, that was a scandal because most people thought it was funny. Like, people
But isn't
were.
that interesting? Because I think if the genders were reversed, it
Mhm.
wouldn't have just been washed away as like this really funny thing. I think it would still get them a little more heat than it would have
Yeah.
gotten Charles.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, well, Fergie is a survivor. She may have been persona non grata in the royal family, but she wrote a tell all memoir called My Story that was a huge hit in America.
Hell yeah.
She also secured a lucrative Weight Watchers sponsorship deal. In her 2011 memoir, Finding Sarah, the Duchess of York also referred to her happy co-parenting life with Prince Andrew. So this was before the Epstein scandal. She says in this memoir that they are the happiest divorced family in the world and refers to Andrew as, quote, her champion. Sarah has been very vocal about her belief that she and Andrew would still be married to this day had it not been for the House of Windsor sabotaging their marriage with their rules, such as their refusal to let Sarah live on his naval base. So, Sadaf, do you believe this is true? Do you believe Sarah and Andrew would still be married if they hadn't been royal?
I would hope not, just because knowing what transpired with him, I would not want her caught up in that more than she's already been. However, I do think the relationship would have been better off if she'd gotten to live on the naval base. I mean, come on, 40 days out of a year for 5 years. That must have had such a bad impact on their relationship. That's not a relationship. That's not a marriage, right?
No, and they hadn't been together for that long when they got married. So
Yeah.
then to say, okay, now we're going to rip you guys apart, I,
It's
I don't
ludicrous.
think.
It's almost like they were rooting against them or they just didn't care. I find it almost diabolical. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
I think they
weird.
just thought that she would suffer. I think that they just sort of thought that she wouldn't complain about it. And I don't think they thought it was humane, but I think they thought that she wouldn't protest. She wouldn't act out by being unfaithful or things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And she was a regular human who was a little bit more assertive than they wanted her to be.
Right. Right. By the way, I did not know that she had a book, and I am going to put it on hold at the library the moment we are done recording.
Oh, she's a
I'm-
prolific author. She has multiple books.
I think you might have told me this, and I don't remember. I got to get into it.
So many books. My mom read My Story when we were on a ski vacation when I was a child.
That feels appropriate.
And then I stole it and read parts of it.
Well, wait a second. How juicy were they? Like, how much does she open up about her life?
Oh, she talks about everything. Like,
Oh,
she
really?
talks about the toe sucking scandal. She talks about
Ooh,
how the royal family discovered it and they were not happy. Like, no. Oh,
love
yeah,
it.
yeah. She talks about the first time Andrew told her he loved her.
Oh,
She talked about how awkward she felt at royal engagements when they were dating because she didn't really have money to buy the kind of clothes that went together that you were supposed to wear.
yeah.
No, it's cute. It's cute. It's sad. She seems like she's fun, right? Like, she
Yeah.
seems fun. She kind of seems like a friend. It's juicy. but you never feel like she's trying to sell people out more than she has to. Like, at this point, this woman needed money, right? She
Right. And why not
has
capitalize on this, honestly?
I mean, Fergie has a tendency to overspend. She has dealt with debt
Oh.
at many points in her life. And I mean, I'm somewhat sympathetic to that because the media would always compare her clothes to Diana's clothes, right? That was one thing that they
Yeah.
would do. And so she felt a lot of pressure to kind of look like a princess, but Andy never had as much money, like Prince Andrew never had as much money as Prince Charles. So she was competing, and you understand sort of how it got into a debt spiral. Uh, I'm not saying it was a good thing
Yeah.
to let happen, but you kind of get how it happened. So she needed to support herself. So she wrote a tell-all memoir. She did that Weight Watchers campaign. I mean, she got entrepreneurial.
Go for it. I'm proud of her for that, honestly.
Okay. So Andrew continued to stand by his ex-wife for years, even after her 2010 scandal where the News of the World accused her of seeking cash for royal access. So, here's what happened. News of the World reporter Mazir Mahmood posed as a billionaire who was willing to give Fergie £500,000, which in her memoir she claims she wanted primarily to build a girls' school in Afghanistan.
Okay.
I mean,
Sure.
I'm not sure if that's true.
Yeah. I don't buy it, but like, okay, Fergie.
Yeah, it's worth noting that the Duchess's finances were in a terrible muddle at the time. For her
Mhm.
part, Sarah claims the tapes of her were doctored to make it look like she was offering access to Andrew in exchange for cash, but Andrew did not abandon or scapegoat his ex. In fact, these two continue living together at his Royal Lodge estate. Yes, they are divorced, but cohabitating.
You're kidding. Like today, 2024.
Yeah, like they've always kept living together.
Wow, that's so
When she
fascinating.
says they'd still be married, I actually think this is true because I think they are. Like I think
They sound that way.
I think they probably have sex.
Oh, for sure.
I think they probably
Wow.
like binge watch TV shows together. Like they probably watched The Wire together. Like I think
Aw.
they probably hang out very regularly. I know they are both very involved parents. So I think they probably hung out with their kids together. No, they basically were married. They were just sort of living in sin royal style.
I kind of love it. I mean, again, God, it's tough with this because, again, knowing what ends up happening with Andrew, it just puts such a dark mark on everything. But generally speaking, I do love that. I mean, listen, if you can cohabitate, co-parent, and just be happy together and living like this, and you're not even married, go for it. God, more power to you. They sound like best friends, if anything.
Yeah, and I mean they have dated other people, but the fact that they keep living together makes me feel like they're more like a polyamorous couple than just like completely broken up. I think they're at least emotionally involved with each other, and I would really, really, really doubt that they've never hooked up.
Oh, I'm sure they have. I think if anything, they definitely still love each other. They do.
Yeah, I mean, she desperately loves him to this day, and I think he still loves her. So, Sadaf, do you believe that Sarah was the victim of a doctored tape and was not flagrantly trying to sell access to her husband for cash? Do you think that that's true?
Oh, don't ask me this. I fear that. I don't think that it was a doctored tape. But here's the thing. Let me pinpoint on this. This is bad journalism on News of the World's part, and most people should know by now. News of the World is was one of the nastiest British tabloids out there, and they would do anything to get a headline. This is just disgusting. You don't do this. So I think she was set up, and I think anything that was the result of that is simply not fair. That being said, I'm sure she probably said something like, I don't know, maybe you could get like a conversation with him on the phone for like 10 minutes, or I don't know. I wouldn't totally put it past her because I don't know that I wouldn't do it. Honestly, because if you're struck for cash, this guy's offering you £500,000. You don't have to do much, and this is like your best friend at home who's always got your back. Why not? Why not?
I think what she claims what she was trying to say was like, well, you might well meet him one day.
Yes.
Which I'm not sure how that's not kind of using your connections to entice someone to give you money, right?
Exactly.
Like, I don't know. She just claims like it wasn't as explicit as the tapes make it out to be. I don't know. One of the people who stood by her after the scandal, other than Andrew, this is fascinating, was Simon Cowell, and he's a really good friend of
What?
hers. And in her 2011 memoir, she has a series of emails from him to her, comforting her.
Wow. Oh, you know what? I think I actually knew that they were friends.
Yeah, they're really close.
I think I knew that. That's so fun and actually makes me like her even more because she's probably got a sassy personality.
To make matters more unsavory for the Duchess of York, in 2011, Sarah Ferguson also borrowed money from Jeffrey Epstein. Yes, the guy who
Ugh.
allegedly ran pretty much a pedophile ring for the world's most elite men. And that is because he was associated with Jeffrey Epstein, how Prince Andrew got accused of rape. Anyway, Sarah now claims that she deeply regrets borrowing this money. She maintains she did not know about his pedophilia at the time. I mean, I believe her that she didn't know about that. She also always stood by Prince Andrew. When the allegations of sexual misconduct surrounding her former husband came out, she posted an Instagram where she defended Andrew and referred to him as, quote, a gentleman. In 2022, she suggested it was the fact that she had once taken money from Epstein that got Andrew caught up in this mess. She referred to Andrew as the man I admire most in the world.
Oof.
Sadaf, what do we make of Fergie's staunch loyalty to Andrew? And assuming she actually didn't know about any sexual misconduct, should we blame her for not believing that it's true? Or is it understandable that she doesn't want to see the father of her children as a sexual predator?
Oh, this is hefty. So I remember when she posted the statement because I was following this whole thing really carefully, and I was just so shocked. But knowing now all this backstory, it does sound like all this time these two have very much had each other's backs forever, and it's almost like she was paying him back by saying this. I don't like that she fully took the sword or fell on her sword. Like, I don't love that she kind of implied that it's because of her. I just That's ridiculous and I don't think that's true at all. I think he did what he did. um but it's tough. I think I despise when the wives, the female partners, are often the ones who have to carry the blame for what their husbands have been getting up to. I don't care that much if she knew or not, because I think this is totally his crime, and I think this is something the royal family should be speaking to, and I don't really consider her a part of the family in that way now. But I have a question for you, Sarah. So you say you feel pretty confident that Sarah didn't know about the pedophilia as she claims. Why? How would you know? Why are you so sure? I'll say.
I just think that, I mean, there were rumors about these things.
Yeah.
I mean, there were stories about these things. I think she's a really naive and trusting person. So I think she probably just assumed there are rumors about everyone. And here's the thing, I think she's more susceptible to believing that because there have been lots of rumors about her in the press as a royal person that weren't true.
Right.
So I think she's probably more likely to give people, especially influential people who end up in the news, the benefit of the doubt and believe that they're innocent and dismiss sort of the noise. I think that she's really empathetic in that way because she's been the victim of a lot of unfounded gossip.
That's a really good point. And I think you also made a good one when you asked me about her viewing the father of her children a certain way. Yeah, I'm sure that's a part of it too. You don't want to view anyone in your family, anyone from your past who you care about, as somebody who would be a sexual predator. What a complete nightmare. Because the thing is, when this happens to someone, it happens to the whole family. She was probably definitely being hit with paparazzi, with constant questions about this, and again, having to answer for him. um yeah, I think I like what you're saying. I think I agree with you there. She certainly knows how it works over there, and it's easier to believe he didn't do it, I'm sure.
It's one of those things where during the fake shake scandal, as was dubbed in the British media,
Yeah.
so many people abandoned her.
Yeah.
And Andrew never did. And so I think then you kind of trauma bond with someone.
Yeah.
And you feel like, well, I can't abandon him now. And also you just don't want to believe that your champion, that's the way she describes him, would be like this, right? Yes, he's the father of her children, but he's also someone who has personally saved her time and time again.
Exactly.
And so I feel like in some way she feels indebted to him. She's also probably still dependent on him. Like, I don't think she's completely self-sufficient. She needs
Oh,
him to
sure.
survive in the world.
Isn't that so interesting? I mean, my big takeaway from all of this and from all the royal deep dives we've done so far, and we have done others if you want to go back through our archive and find them, I always feel like these royals, they get so locked up and caught up in things together, and then no one else can really know what that experience is like. So I like the phrase you used, Sarah. I do think they kind of all become trauma bonded. It's almost like, what could life possibly be after that? You are a royal forever by brand, by name, and if you don't stand up for each other, there's nobody else really who's going to have your back forever. We've seen how um that whole place will turn on you if you choose to go a different path.
Mm-hmm.
So it's certainly interesting, isn't it? I don't know, because I often think, like, if Harry and Meghan split, I don't know, what would that be like? Would they actually even announce it? Would they make it public? I feel like they would also be, I can see them also being a couple who would stay in a house together for the rest of their lives.
Just hanging out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always seen, before we found out Andrew was a sexual predator, and no, I definitely want better for Sarah than Andrew. But I used to see him.
So does Omar.
I used to see the two of them kind of like a couple from a Shonda Rhimes show, right? It's like they'll get back together in season 22, right? Like they're meant to be, right? They were kind of, in my view, the Japril of the royal family. Like,
I love that so much. Yeah, I can see that.
yeah. And if you don't know what I mean when I said Japril, I meant Jackson and April, who, like, everyone always knew when they were with other people that they would get back together. And they did. Spoiler alert. That is how I saw Sarah and Andrew.
I really love that. I love that so much. I think that's what's tough with Sarah's story in this area, because God, it takes such a sour turn, doesn't it? Like, I want to know that she's got another romance in her life. Not that romance is everything, of course, but I don't know. It just leaves a bad taste in my mouth that this is the person she's going to technically spend the rest of her life with, it seems like.
This just says to me that she has always had low self-esteem, and she still does to this
Ooh.
day.
Ooh, good point. Oh, ouch. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean, to this day, she's grateful that the prince chose her. She's grateful he
Oh.
hasn't abandoned her, even though he should be grateful she hasn't abandoned him, right? He's the
Absolutely.
lucky one here because he's the one who's horrible. He's the one who is
Yeah.
accused of sexual misconduct here. But I think to this day, she feels so bad about herself that she always feels like, just incredibly thankful that Andrew would even look at her, let alone still hang out with her.
Oh, Sarah, this breaks my heart. Oh my God, that's so sad. But also, you know what? What's funny? God, even more relatable. Even more fucking relatable. Jesus.
I know. It feels like she's still starstruck by him to this day. Like the fact that she calls him a gentleman and my champion, right? She's playing into the narrative of him as the handsome prince. Like she's never gotten over that part of the fairy tale. Like, yes, she realized her life wouldn't be like a fairy tale, it wouldn't be happily ever after, but she's still casting him as the handsome prince.
You know what? I would just love to see her have like a late in life romance, just something like a new companion. Wouldn't that be so nice? Or just something else? I mean, I am glad that their daughters are out and about in society and she gets to maybe live through them a little bit, but I just don't want that to be it for her. I really hope that.
Yeah, I know. So today, Sarah Ferguson is a grandmother and also a romance novelist and a children's author.
I
You
love
can
that.
read her 2021 novel, Her Heart for a Compass, which is a semi fictional love story that features one of Sarah's female ancestors in the lead role, Lady Margaret Montague Douglas Scott.
Wow. I love that. I love that.
Yeah, I love that for her. This is her romance novel era.
Ever the romantic, huh? That's her.
I do get that impression that she is just a consummate romantic,
Yeah.
that she still believes in love, like that nothing can break this woman's steadfast belief in love.
Yes. Yes. I love that so much.
So this brings us to our final segment, Hindsight is 2024, where we choose the one moment that we might have handled differently if we were if we were the subject of the story. Sadaf, what would you have done?
I just said it. It was just that last bit. I wish that she didn't stand up for Andrew as much as she did, at the very least. Like, tone it down, girl. I mean, I wish she didn't at all, but I think that was a little bit too much, and I hate seeing a woman fall on her sword that much for a man. I'm sorry, I can't. What about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I don't think she needed to fall on her sword for him. I really don't. That's probably what I would regret most as well. Also, like, maybe Fergie, like, move out. Like, don't cohabitate with this man
Yeah.
anymore.
Yes, move out. I mean, I bet it's good digs, though.
Yeah, exactly. And London real estate's expensive, so having a
Yeah.
nice country house you can retreat to, I get it. You want that. But seriously, like, maybe move on, have some boundaries, have a late in
Love
life
yourself.
romance.
Yes, love yourself. Love yourself, Fergie. We are rooting for you, ma'am.
Yes, develop some self-esteem, stop people pleasing. I want you to be happy.
Amen. Co-signed.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you to our wonderful editor, Evan Wexler, and thanks you to our listeners. We are nothing without you. If you want to hear more from me, you can find me on Instagram at Sahagian Sarah. Sadaf, where can our listeners find you?
Listeners can find me at _Sadaf Hassan. And if you liked this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe so other listeners can find us. And by the way, we love doing these royal episodes. So if there's anything you want to hear more about or a deep dive on any particular royal, let us know. And if you'd like us to keep growing, we'd obviously love for you to support us on Patreon at patreon.com/The Reheat. There's a lot of fun stuff over there for you guys. Thanks for listening.